Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming on time and welcome to today's session of the COVID-19 Academy. We sincerely appreciate all of you being here, showing up in such large numbers, and for all of your support. We have a very informative and interesting session planned for you today. My name is Astha, and I will be your moderator for this session. Let me start with a few introductions to the Academy, to our course today, and our resource persons. As you know, the COVID-19 Academy is a capacity building initiative of the UNICEF, WHO India, the HCL Foundation, and Sphere India for volunteers and outreach workers from across our country to ensure COVID-19 preparedness and response. Today is actually our 10th session, so we are celebrating a milestone. Now let me speak a bit about the session. Today's session will begin with an overview of child protection-related vulnerabilities during COVID-19 and the roles and responsibilities of different structures. We will try to understand how violence can get heightened in lockdown phases and the steps available to counter this. We will also unpack some advisories from the Honorable Supreme Court and other bodies on various child protection issues. But that's not all. Further, the session will help us understand the emotional and psychosocial needs of children affected directly or indirectly by the pandemic. It will introduce tools, including a manual that has been developed for this purpose, to frontline functionaries to help parents and caregivers to understand these issues and engage children positively and seek specialized help if so required. To talk about all of this with us today, we have 4 esteemed resource persons who will guide us with their presentations for the next hour and a half. Let me introduce them one by one. Our first resource person today is Dr. Shekhar Seshadri from NIMHANS. Now, Dr. Shekhar is a graduate of the Maulana Azad Medical College in Delhi and a postgraduate in psychiatry from NIMHANS, or the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences in Bangalore. He is currently senior professor in the Department of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and associate dean of behavioral sciences at NIMHANS. Besides working with child and adolescent mental health, including developmental disabilities, he's actively involved in the areas of gender and sexualities, violence or trauma and abuse, children in difficult circumstances, juvenile justice, experiential methodologies, school programs or teacher training in life skills education, community and school mental health programs, forum theater, and qualitative research. Thank you for being with us today, Dr. Shekhar. Those accomplishments are truly, truly inspirational. Thank you, Dr. Shekhar. Our second resource person today is Ms. Nirmala Pandey from UNICEF. Ms. Pandey, she's a child protection specialist with UNICEF India and has been working in the field of child protection and child rights for the past 14 years. Ms. Pandey was earlier associated as a senior consultant with the Ministry of Women and Child Development of the Government of India. Thank you also for being here today, Ms. Pandey.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Tanishtha Datta from the UNICEF as well. Ms. Datta, she's also a child protection specialist and has over 20 years of work experience in the human rights sector. She's now focused on child protection system strengthening, justice for children, and ending violence against children issues. Thank you also for being here, Tanishtha.
Thank you. Astha.
And lastly, we have with us today Ms. Sonal Kapoor. She's the founder director of Protsahan India Foundation, which is an organization that works critically on child protection issues and encouraging young girls to reach their full potential with access to education, health, and justice. Thank you all for doing such incredible and important work. We welcome you to our webinar today. Thank you for being here. Now, without any further ado, let us start with our first presentation. Please, Tanishtha, you have the floor. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I'll just quickly share my screen first. Okay, I hope that is visible to everybody. Oh, sorry.
Yes, Tanisha, we could see your email.
Yeah, wrong file, wrong window.
Very understandable. Yes, we see the presentation now.
Okay. I probably needed to do a full screen before I shared, right? Or can I do it from here?
You can do it now. I think from the view bar at the top of the screen, once you have opened the file. Tanisha, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, good evening to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here on this online session for child protection and mental health of children, as Astha has so succinctly summarized the objectives of today's call or today's session. I think one of the things, even before I start, is to bring upfront this news that we've all seen today. Maybe many of you have, some of you haven't, about this 12-year-old girl who used to work in a farm in Telangana in one of the border districts, who wanted to walk back to her family in Chhattisgarh, again in the border of Telangana and Chhattisgarh, and she walked nearly 100 kilometers and she died before she could reach her home. She died of starvation, of dehydration, and one can't even imagine the trauma this little girl went through in these agonizing moments and the circumstances that led her to take such extreme steps. And so the topic of today's discussion becomes, I think, even more critical for all of us, all of you who are at the ground level working with communities more directly on trying to understand that how COVID is impacting children, especially the protection of children, and what role we can play in mitigating some of these risks for children. More specifically, we all understand this kind of a pandemic and a lockdown situation, that there are a lot of factors that are adding up to the stress and anxiety in families, in communities, and for children. There is definitely a disruption of livelihood. And so there is fear and anxiety of families about that. There are some family separations and lack of communication with families where migrant workers are concerned. They're stranded in different parts of the country, as we know. Many of them do not have money to even recharge their mobiles. They're trying to reach their villages or hometowns and they are unable to do so. So there is a whole erosion of the social capital in communities in large sections of the population. There's also a lot of, there's a breakdown of being able to access resources, and there's a breakdown of trust and community support. Also, there's a lot of stigma and against certain groups. We have again seen another horrific news today about the doctor in Chennai who was not even allowed a proper burial because communities were so scared and so worried about a COVID infected patient and a dead body. And so they did not even allow a proper burial for the doctor who gave his life treating COVID patients. Specifically for children, all of these factors add up, and it leads to heightened risks of abuse, neglect, violence, and of course, a lot of psychological distress, which later our very eminent speakers, Dr. Sheshadri from NIMHANS and my colleagues will talk about. We also see in many cases that there is also family separation, as I mentioned. And for children, this has an immediate impact because they are suddenly unaccompanied by adults and they have less access to any kind of resources. Who are the most vulnerable children? When we talk about them, who are these children? They are usually, first of all, we see children who are living in childcare institutions or in alternative care like foster care, etc., who are as it is vulnerable. They are separated from their families due to whatever reasons. And now because of lockdown, their communication, their ability to meet their families or to meet the social workers and counselors has also got restricted. As a result, their vulnerability is enhanced. We also have in childcare institutions, children who are in conflict with law. And we know that many of these childcare institutions do have a lot of overcrowding of such cases because there are many children there waiting, pending, their cases are pending and they have not been released on bail. So there's a whole lot of anxiety and concern about these children as well, especially during a pandemic like this. I talked about the migrant families. I talked about this case of this young 12-year-old girl and the horrific end she has met, but she's probably not the only one. There must be many other such children who are on the move, either with their families or they have become separated or they are unaccompanied. We know that child labor is a reality in our country. Even if you go by census figures, it's at least 10 million children who are in labor conditions across the country. Where are these children now? Where are the children on the streets? There is also a huge population of children and families who live on the streets, and they are also at risk of facing a lot of abuse and exploitation under these current circumstances. We also have to think about children with disabilities who are not able to access maybe online platforms or be able to have any mobility in such times, and what kind of measures can be taken to cater to such children. On the issue of violence, this is something very critical. This will be silent and invisible, but this is something that we will face more and more also post-lockdown. Why? Because I already mentioned the underlying causes. There is increased anxiety and stress in households, even households that are not having to move across the country like the migrants, even other households in urban poor pockets, even middle-class families. There is stress, there is concern about the future, about employment, about money, and a lot of this results into child maltreatment, violent disciplining within the houses. We know that many houses, there is domestic violence and gender-based violence prevalence. The NCRB data on reported cases shows that most of the violence that women face are actually perpetrated by somebody they know, oftentimes somebody in the same household as they live in. And children are witness to this, become party to this, and therefore their vulnerability increases as well. Child sexual abuse. We talk about it again, and we know again over here that almost 80% of child sexual abuse is actually where perpetrators are known to the children. Now imagine being locked down with your perpetrator or abuser and not being able to ask for help or not being able to run away or get any support in such situations. The other phenomenon, which may not be affecting all, but at least we know that the rate at which India is getting digital is increasing fast. And a lot of children are spending extra time online because schools being closed, lack of routines and other things to do. Also, a lot of learning platforms are now online. And there is an increased or enhanced risk of online sexual abuse and exploitation that we are being warned about, not just in India, but across the world. And I'll come to this in a little bit more detail later. Just the lockdown can have all those impacts on children. And if you think about post-lockdown, and if we think about the next 6 months, there is also going to be an extended impact on children. We have seen in many cases in some other countries where we have small examples, for example, in Africa during Ebola, etc., that the cases of missing unaccompanied children increase. Are we geared up to respond to that? What will be the fallout of the migration crisis? If families are in distress, if social protection becomes weak, this will eventually impact child protection. Children's access to education will be impacted. We will see more children going into labor, possibly getting trafficked, early marriages as a result of distress. And overall, the situation of children is something that we are deeply worried about. This was also echoed recently in a statement by the UN Secretary General, where he warned the world that if we don't start thinking about COVID and its impact on children right now, we will have another kind of emergency on our hand once we have dealt with COVID a little bit, because the the way in which children's rights and their well-being will be impacted is something that is not reversible. So that is something that we have to be very cognizant of as government, but also as civil society and NGOs and community-based organizations that all of you represent in your work as well. On the 3rd of April, the Supreme Court of India took cognizance of this whole issue of COVID and its impact on children, and they issued a very detailed guideline. This was primarily for children who are in the care of the state, but we also know that many childcare institutions are run by NGOs and voluntary organizations, religious trusts, where all of you also have a role to play to ensure that these guidelines are followed there as well. Have a look at these guidelines. I have it as a link in my presentation. If Sphere shares this presentation, you'll be able to access it. It very clearly outlines the roles of all those stakeholders who are dealing with children in terms of running childcare homes or hostels or schools or any kind of activities with children that as NGOs also you are doing. What are some of the risk management protocols that you need to keep in mind? Especially for children in conflict with law, and that is more a government specific recommendation. There are recommendations around their bail, etc., and what can be done. Very interestingly, for the first time, the Supreme Court has also taken cognizance of the children who are in alternative care. So children who are in foster care or with extended kinship care, etc., with their families, how they can be monitored. The Supreme Court has urged organizations and stakeholders that even if they cannot physically go and monitor on the well-being of children, there is nothing that prevents them from doing monitoring through telephone calls and online follow-ups. So that is something that the Supreme Court has also outlined. That is something that all of you can also do in your communities, in the work that you do, even if you do not do work related to child protection, but there are children in the families that you work with. Can you make calls to them and ask about the well-being of the children? We know that online education platforms are only available to a certain segment of children. Vast majority of our children in rural areas and urban poor areas are probably not being able to access this. So how are they faring? What are some of the problems they are facing? Is there something as organizations that you can support them with? The Supreme Court guidelines also give very detailed guidance on the mental health of children and what needs to be done, which is something that Dr. Sheshadri will cover in more detail in his presentation, so I will not touch upon that. The NCPCR and UNICEF and one of our partners, Cyber Peace Foundation, we also came together to issue some guidance on how children can be kept safe online during pandemic. This is also available online. If you just look for it anywhere on the internet, you'll find it. Alarming statistics about the circulation of child sexual abuse materials in India. Simple Google analytics is also showing that words like child porn and child sex, there has been a steep increase in the search for such words through Google since the lockdown happened. So that's also something of concern. And these are things that can very easily slip through the cracks if we don't make sure that we are having these conversations with parents about how they can keep their children safe. So just look online on the UNICEF India website and you'll be able to find these guidelines. They're also age specific, as also other materials on this, on how children can be kept safe. This is an agenda that we are also taking up with the police, the NCRB, to make sure that on the response side also, people are aware of this emerging threat and are able to take precautionary measures. Now, technically, these functions are to be done by the child protection structures. But what would I request from all of you is to ensure that the child protection structures in your districts are supported to be able to do this. Everybody is stretched right now. A lot of people are not able to get out of their homes. They are not being able to access the normal services that they can. Even the district child protection units, which are there in all districts, feel the need for more extended support. So for example, simple things like if your organization has the ability to provide counseling support to children, can you reach out to the DCPUs and offer this online counseling support to them for your districts? On violence prevention, as I mentioned already, if you're already working with communities and there is a way for you to telephonically get in touch with some of these community leaders and influencers that you work with, can you ask them to spread the message of violence prevention in their communities? Can you tell them to flag if there are any concerns around children's safety and security in their villages or urban areas that they have come across, and so be able to report it so that some method of help can be provided to these children. There is also the simple facts that if you are dealing with migrant populations and providing any kind of relief support to migrant populations, can you have a child-focused view in that? Can you make sure that if you come across unaccompanied children or children where the family is in a lot of distress, and can you immediately make the referral linkages to the necessary government authorities to support these children? Who are the necessary government authorities in this case? Your district child protection unit and your child welfare committee, but also more importantly, Childline, which is a 24-hour emergency response service, which you can contact at any time and report cases that you feel need some immediate intervention. So that is one number for you to note and circulate in your own networks as well. Similarly, any issues related to women and violence, you can use the government helplines of 1091, plus many states have their specific helplines as well for reporting abuse or violence against women. And so as NGOs and civil society organizations, you can play a critical role in amplifying this information to the communities that you work with so that they know where to go if there is a distress situation. In terms of COVID-related information also, please follow the official credible sources of information that are verified from the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare through their national helpline that has been set up specifically for COVID, and the details are mentioned on the screen. Finally, I would like to end by saying that while we expect that all of you will be doing your bit in trying to make the spaces safer for children in such times, we also want to ensure that you are safe, and in any kind of outreach work, if required, finally after lockdown also, you keep in mind some of the main do's and don'ts of COVID protection. So these are again from Government of India or Ministry of Health and Family Welfare advisories, but it talks about social distancing if you are doing community outreach work, and the kind of precautions you need to take in terms of the disposal of your masks and the cleaning of the clothes, etc., that you wear when you go out. And all these are here. I will not get into the detail, but this is just to re-emphasize that all of us who are working and who are gearing up post-lockdown to start more extensive work and outreach work with our communities, we need to also be mindful of how we and our employees and our workers can also stay safe and protected in such times. That is all I have. And without any further delay, I will now hand over to Dr. Shekhar Sheshadri from NIMHANS to start his session. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tanishna. Thank you very much. Sabko mera namaskar. I can see that more than 1,000 people have logged on. I'm getting messages saying that other people are also trying to log on to this very important session, but I think the saturation point has been reached. It's a credit to the importance that has been given to the subject that we are discussing today. To begin with, I would like to wish all of you good health and a safe journey through this unprecedented time in human history. Pandemics have been known in the past. 120 years ago, during the Spanish flu, many more people died than the numbers reported here. But in our lifetime, a pandemic of this nature is something we have not experienced. And 50 years from now, 100 years from now, what we are experiencing today will be written in human history. And it is our collective responsibility somehow to make the change in children's lives so that the kids that we hope to serve as we emerge from this health emergency and crisis, that these children 5 years from now, 10 years from now, would be able to have adult memories that look back upon this difficult time in a way that they came out of it with resilience and with good well-being. I want to take a link from the point that Tanishta made about the Supreme Court order. This was a suo motu writ petition which was heard, and the order was passed on 3rd of April, as she mentioned, in a quorum consisting of Honorable Justice Nageshwar Rao and Honorable Justice Deepak Gupta. Interestingly, the Supreme Court order has a very long section on well-being and mental health. And I'd like to take you through these points and at each point tell you what it means in terms of field activities. This is important because as I was going through the list of all the people who have logged in today's session, I can see that many NGOs, many CBOs, and many organizations that work on the field are represented in this endeavor today. And I hope that you'll be able to take this back and assist the children that you so ably served at. The first point that the Supreme Court order made on mental health and well-being is acknowledge the stress and the anxiety and the worry of the children. Now, let's analyze this first point a little in detail. What do you acknowledge? You acknowledge that this stress and anxiety and worry is a natural response to an unnatural situation. Anxiety and worry is not the problem. The COVID pandemic is the problem, and anxiety and worry is a natural consequence of this. Now, for a given child, the range of emotional and mental responses to this reality can be from confusion to concern to worry to anxiety and to overriding fear. This is a range in severity. Now, how do you recognize what is at a level of confusion? And therefore, you can deal with it by simple reassurance and simple health education. And how do you deal with a child who has severe anxiety and worry, which renders the child dysfunctional? But the most important and the first step that the Supreme Court speaks about is acknowledge the children's stress, acknowledge their anxiety and worry. Also understand as service providers that different children have different ways of reacting to the same stress or the same anxiety. One child may respond with withdrawal and silence, and another child may respond with anger and irritability. And this distinction is important because no two children respond to the same stress in the same way. Similarly, behind the same behavior, such as anxiety or withdrawal, there may be different reasons. One child's withdrawal may be because of the anxiety about contracting the illness. Another child's anxiety would be, is my family safe? And therefore, to understand the context of the anxiety is important when you enter into counseling processes. The second point that the Supreme Court order stated was reassure the children. Reassure them that they are safe, that they are looked after, whether these are children in families or whether they are children in childcare institutions, children without parental care, children on the streets, children of migrant workers, children in NGO shelters. They need to be assured that they are safe. They need to be reassured, if they are children in institutions, that food supplies and material will come into the institution. They are reassured that it is quite okay to share, it is okay to talk. Their experiences, their thoughts, their anxieties, their worries are validated as legitimate. Now, what is very interesting here in the Supreme Court order is here is a court that recognizes the importance of a culture of conversations. It did not require the COVID pandemic to remind us that we have lost the culture of conversations with children. Unfortunately, the nature of adult relationships with children is constructed on the basis of instruction, expectation, control, and obedience, and not on a culture of conversations. To rediscover this within families, within institutions, and use that to reassure children is the point the Supreme Court makes. The third point that the order states is encourage the children to connect to each other, to connect to the institution, to connect to the staff of the institution, to connect to the larger universe outside of where they exist. It has been well established in social research that the stronger your networks are, your supportive networks, the less stress you have. And the weaker your networks, the lesser people you know, and you don't know who to go to during times of stress and during times of a predicament, the more stressed you feel. And this is the time, therefore, in families to essentially connect. If a child is in a family, connect to your extended family wherever they are. We are in the era of the web. We are in the era of the digital world. We don't exist in a time in the 60s. You know, if my dad went to America for a work related trip, 1 month till he came back, there was no way of getting in touch with him. There was something called a trunk call, but you know how unreliable that was. Fourth, avoid too much reading. And in institutions, if there's a television, avoid too much of watching of television. Even adults' anxieties and concerns, legitimate as they are, we are all in a state of agitating, ruminating, and cogitating over what this pandemic means, and not just what it means. What does the lockdown mean? How long will it last? What's going to happen post-lockdown? What will be the social, the economic, and the health ramifications of this pandemic? All of us have legitimate worries and anxieties. But if we allow it to overwhelm us, and indeed if we allow it to reflect on the children that we interact with, it gets to them and it accentuates their own stress and anxiety. Therefore, avoid too much of this kind of discussion and exposure and divert their attention to other topics. The fifth point that the Supreme Court makes is establish and maintain routines. Now, this is very critical because what happens in the time of a lockdown? Two things happen. If you look at children in institutions, one may argue that, perhaps they are used to mobility constraint. But look at it from their perspective. It's almost like a lockdown within a lockdown. And how do they deal with this predicament? But more than that, whether they are children in families, children of migrant workers, what the lockdown does and mobility constraint does is there is a loss of routine, there is a loss of predictability, there is a loss of control, there is a loss of learning opportunities, There is a loss of social spaces exposure, and there is a loss of peer interaction. How do you compensate for this to maintain children's well-being and mental health? And this is where, if the children cannot go out into the external world, how do you bring the world in to the family? How do you bring the world in to a childcare institution? And you do so by maintaining different kinds of routines within the institution itself. For example, to give children small responsibilities, not major stuff, which is the responsibility of the institution's staff, but little things that they can do so that they have a sense of affiliation and a sense of belonging to the institution. They are also considered as major contributors and people who are participating in the work of the family, in the work of, and this is where bonding and attachment takes place. And if you look at it in a family structure, if you rediscover new routines, such as learning exercises in creative and different ways, giving them small responsibilities at home so that they have a sense of belonging and of family participation and a sense of affiliation. Creative and artistic and aesthetic activities, which keeps the mind alert and activity. This is the time for storytelling and story sharing. 3 things about mommy and daddy that you never knew. 5 new things that we would like to do. Maintaining a log of these kind of activities, a chronicle, a kind of a workbook, which 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when they look back upon this point of time in our histories, they can turn the pages of the book and say, this is what helped me, and this is what made me feel reassured and resilient. The 6th point that the Supreme Court order made was spend more time in activities that are relaxing, activities that are enjoyable. The 7th point it made, and Tanishta referred to this, is we must consider the possibility of escalation of violence. Whether they are children in families where there are pre-existing themes of corporal punishment, of physical abuse, of emotional abuse, of domestic violence, of child sexual abuse, and the lockdown constrains these families, what happens to children? And we already know from figures that have come from Childline that there has been an increase in the figures of calls that come concerning physical abuse and concerning sexual abuse. And this is something that service providers and family members must be cognizant of so that we address it. It is also about violence which escalates in institutions when peers are together and you don't have a routine and you don't have a structure, you don't have supervision, you don't have reassurance, you're not given information, then the tension and anxiety that it generates really gives rise and spills over into irritability and anger and then into peer-related violence. And therefore, the relationship between reassurance and routine and the manner that it actually addresses escalation into anger and therefore into violence. The next point that the Supreme Court order made was about peer support. And this is indeed linked to the whole issue of what kind of staff do we have in childcare institutions? Is there a staff shortage? And can we consider peer-mediated groups? Can we form committees of children, squads that help out? Older children can help out younger children. They can take responsibilities in some kind of maintenance and supervision of the routine activities that are carried out in the institution. The next point that the Supreme Court order made was about working with the staff so that the staff are capacitated and skilled through these kind of learning exercises that the COVID Academy from Sphere India is organizing today, for example. How can the staff work with children who have pre-existing mental health issues, and how can they work with children who have new onset distress? And what are some of the simple methods that you can use to actually assist these children? And I'll be covering this towards the end of my sharing with you. The next point that the Supreme Court order states is no stigma. Every cough and every sneeze is not because of COVID. There are allergies and there are other reasons. And therefore, stigmatizing a child or even stigmatizing a field level worker, either because of a cough or a sneeze or because they go into areas which are less served or which are areas of dense populations, would be discriminatory and stigmatizing approaches to which we take strong objection. And this is something that we need to speak about so that destigmatizing and non-discriminatory approaches are very critical and should be the platform on which most of our work is based. The importance of physical exercise in institutions as well as in families to keep children's physical body, their circulation and their metabolism intact. The last point that the Supreme Court order makes is to work with social services, um, those who provide online resources for learning, online resources for counseling. And as Tanishta pointed out, with specific emphasis on young children and children with disability, because these are the most vulnerable. They don't have a voice compared to, neurotypical children or average children who may have a voice. That, and there must be special emphasis and alertness to the situation of children who are under the age of 6, children who have various forms of disability, and so on. What does this all mean in terms of the nuances of psychosocial and mental health assistance? Both Nirmala from UNICEF and Sonal from Protsahan are going to be sharing this wonderful resource that has been prepared, where they encourage you to connect emotionally with children. They encourage you to understand children's concerns, both normal children and vulnerable children. It speaks about being aware of situations like violence and abuse. The manual speaks of creating normal and joyous experiences within the family institutions. And it speaks about how to help when stress and anxiety are present. And they've given a whole set of guidelines there. But what does it mean in terms of a couple of important things that you can do to keep in mind to cap up what I want to say over the Supreme Court order? First, the children's minds need to be kept at work through stories, through art, through aesthetics, through music, through activity, through routine, through responsibilities, through engagement. When minds are at work, well-being is maintained. If minds are not at work, concerns and anxieties tend to ruminate and then spill over. The second issue that one needs to keep in mind is children's concerns must be addressed. They may be concerns about the disease, about the lockdown, how long will it last, how long will the pandemic last, what's going to happen 6 months from now, what's going to happen to schools, what's going to happen to exams, what about adolescents who are at the cusp, what will happen to competitive exams, entry to universities and professional colleges. All these kind of anxieties are going to spill over now. And we need to have a set of response repertoire ready to address the concerns that children have. Children who have more severe and disabling anxieties, how reassurance that this is a normal response to an abnormal situation, a human predicament that the entire world is going through. Principles of relaxation, principles of yoga and meditation and mindfulness, creative writing, art-based activities, all of which the manual that Nirmala and Sonal are going to speak to you about references. refer to in detail. And finally, how do you help children gain a sense of citizenship and create new memories during this time of I remember a very evocative experience when I had worked in a childcare institution. We used to go there twice, thrice a week, a couple of years ago, over several months. And I noticed that every time there was the sound of an aeroplane going over the head, these girls would close their eyes, fold their hands, and mumble something. And I was interested and intrigued. And after I observed it a couple of times, and then I asked them, "What is it that you do?" And I was really moved and touched by what they said. And they said, whenever we hear the sound of an aeroplane moving on top, we close our eyes and fold our hands because we know there's a pilot and the air hostess and the steward and passengers there. And we pray for their safety and we wish that they reach their destination safely. What a wonderful example and what a moving example of empathy. Perhaps in families and childcare institutions, we need to create new stories and narratives and therefore memories, just as the Honorable Prime Minister spoke about lighting candles to honor the health workers and frontline workers. What about the farmers who grow vegetables and grains? What about the truck drivers who transport them? The health workers, the shopkeepers who keep their shops open, putting their health and safety in jeopardy so that all of us can eat and be well and healthy in this enormous time. That maybe lighting a candle once a week or once in a while to remember these people is a sense of these children gaining a sense of citizenry. And maybe in childcare institutions, even if they make simple masks, just by discarded cloth that institution staff bring from their house. We clean them very well, just make fold holes in them, put a string around, and just give it to these thelawalas and shopkeepers who can't afford to buy masks. Some of our creativity then serves people who cannot afford to buy them, and they maintain their health and safety. This is the kind of framework that we can keep in mind for how we approach mental health and psychosocial care in the time of the COVID pandemic. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I pray for your health and safety and for the wonderful work that all of you do. And I salute all of you who are in the front line to really serve the most vulnerable of the population. And I'll now hand you over to Nirmala from UNICEF and Sonal from Protsahan, who are going to share with you the resources that are available in this wonderful and evocative manual that they have prepared for you. More power to you, ladies and gentlemen. Power to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sheshadri, for such an enlightening talk and making us understand not only what Honorable Supreme Court has given the instruction, but what it really means for children. I would try to share my screen now. Yes. I hope everybody can see. I hope so.
Perfect. Yes, you can see it.
Yes.
If you just great.
Yes. Thank you so much. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to be here with all of you who are doing a great work at the forefront. As speakers before me, Tanishta and Dr. Sheshadri has pointed out that, of course, we know that children everywhere are being affected by COVID-19. But it's not that COVID-19 has created a, of course, it has created a problem, but it is also that the way we communicate with children, the way we look at them, it has been traditionally in our own DNA. And that is something which we need to take note of as well when we talk about responding to. As it was pointed out, those children who are most vulnerable, who do not have a strong support system, face greater challenges, and they are impacted by COVID in a way which might last lifelong for them. Hence, there is a need, as Dr. Shekhar said, that we need to tackle this issue now. We need to ensure that they get all the support which is required for them in their families, in their communities. Now, this manual is based on the principles of community based mental health and psychosocial support, which is based on the premises, as Dr. Shikhar was saying already, that it the that there's a very close relationship between a person's emotional well-being and the social context. It includes the relationships within a family and the community, the culture, as well as the spiritual values which are there for for an individual as a child, and how they relate to the outside world. For this manual, the emphasis is on strengthening that support system and the social cultural environment. It gives us with a very tangible tool. Uh, it recognizes that people have skills and assets and resources for coping. Every family, every community has those coping mechanisms. The well-being of the children depends on um, leveraging those assets, leveraging on those existing coping mechanisms, and recognizing them as a resource, involving communities and parents, and most of all, involving children, giving them that agency which is required, giving them that space which is required and which is rightfully theirs. The MPHSS framework proposes a three-tier support for children at the family level, at the community level, and at the society at large, which looks at children as an active agent and not as participants. It looks at preventing the risks for long-term repercussions. It builds on hope, safety, empathy, and social connectedness, as Dr. Shekhar was already pointing out. It looks at community efficacy, and it looks at a clear coordination mechanism. This is where our roles become very, very important. That as frontline workers who are connected with the community, with the people, it's becomes our responsibility to maintain this coordination where MPHS is integrated as a technical expertise across the section, whether people who are working on it directly or not, whoever is coming in contact must have some skills, some understanding of these needs, and should be able to help children in some way. And as Dr. Shekhar has already mentioned, children with pre existing mental health issues, we need to take special care of them. Children with existing special needs, disabilities, we need to take special care of them and continue the services which are there for them. Now, what is this manual all about? Through this, what are we trying to do? We are trying to promote an environment where children can grow up and develop their full potential. The basic part is that children need to have fun, they need to feel safe, and they need to be healthy. That is the basic premises on which we build on this manual. It provides us uh, with simple tools to facilitate spaces where children are listened to, they can express, and caregivers can also connect with children directly. It contains simple methods for managing anxiety and stress. The activities which are being proposed are into two age groups, addresses two age groups of children, younger children in the 6 to 10 years, and then there are adolescents who have a little bit different kind of needs, who are in the 11 to 19 years. The activities and information packages help us talk to children about COVID and its effect, But that's not all. It also helps us to connect to them emotionally. It was basically developed for childline functionaries and NGO frontline workers who can support parents and caregivers to carry out the activities. The contents are there. The manual has been already shared with all of you. Many of you may have received it, and many of you may not have. It will be available to you through Sphere India's website, or mailed to you if you contact Sphere India or us directly as well. Now, what does the manual entail about understanding emotional needs of children? As Dr. Shikhar has already pointed out, that children express their psychological distress in many different ways. What can a caregiver or a parent do in such kind of situation? There are simple tips for them. It helps us to understand that all emotions are valid. It gives us tips for engaging in a creative and interactive way, which is such an important thing. It uses play and drawing and storytelling. Of course, it also gives parents and caregivers understanding of what goes on when there is an extensive trauma for the child, when there is violence in the family, or how to even recognize if any such thing is going out, and maybe a child is experiencing sexual abuse. So there are simple tips for that, and it can help parents and caregivers not only from the perspective of COVID, but also for a longer safety point of view for children and supporting them in their emotional needs. It also tells us that, you know, there are times when children need specialized help. There is nothing wrong in seeking specialized help. And it also gives us the toll free numbers from NIMHANS for Childline, or even if there are some domestic violence cases, how can you seek help? So, those tips are there, which makes it handy and easy for the users and parents and caregivers. A special section is for children who need special care, who are more vulnerable. They are the children who don't have an emotional support system, a social support system, whose parents don't have the capacity to protect them, or who are in childcare institutions without parental care, children who are on the move. As already Tanishta has pointed out, these children have very special kinds of needs. They are more vulnerable, and therefore the mental trauma they undergo is also of much more severe nature, and it can have a much more severe effect on children. There are many feelings which they go, which children would go through. They will feel insecure, scared, they will feel lonely, and they will have trust issues, because most probably and then not, many of these children would have also experienced some kind of violence or the other, uh, extreme neglect, and all of these things are connected with their mental health well-being. So how does one address them, and how does one link them to existing services so that we can help children? What are the three things, as Dr. Shekhar has already pointed out, the three very important things which we talk about? First and most important thing is to listen. It's not just, only talking to children. It's actually listening with empathy, encourage them to share their concerns and ask questions in an open way, create that space where they can actually talk about their emotions, and where we are actually respectful. That is most important, that children can share their feelings, children can share their concerns, and above all, children can share if something abusive is happening with them. Then, of course, comfort them, praise them, and most of all, we try to reassure children as much honestly as possible, because while reassuring them, it is, of course, we all know this is the basic principle. We can't lie. We can't tell them that, you know, whatever they are wishing or whatever they are wanting might be possible, but we can reassure them that most possible ways are being looked into to keep them safe. The world is fighting, and maybe give those historical context, like Dr. Shekhar was saying earlier, that we had overcome many things in the past, and maybe we will overcome this situation as well. Now, that Dr. Shekhar has already touched on these points, but it is very important that we recognize some of the signs where psychological distress is going beyond a limit and the child will need some specialized help. And it is important that at these points, if children are having these kind of symptoms or expressing these emotions, then specialized help is sought, either through childline, through child welfare committees, or reaching out to NIMHANS or any other resources which you might have for specialized help. So difficulty in sleeping, nightmares, fatigue or loss of energy, uh, clinging on dependent behavior, which is more than usual. Some children and adolescents might also have recurring thoughts of death and suicide. And if one recognizes that, immediately help has to be sought, specialized help has to be sought, and this is something which we need to be very cognizant about, especially children who are in childcare institutions. Many of them come with already existing mental health care issues, and it is important to note that during these kind of stressful situations, their situation might worsen. Hence it is important that we address their needs through specialized help and keep ourselves ready to find those helps. How do you find that help, and how do you link children to them? And after this section, I would hand it over to Sonal to talk more about on how we communicate to children. We have talked about that it's very important to listen to them. How do you make them open up to them? How do you talk to them about COVID, and what we should do and what we should not be doing, as well as the activities which are there in the manual? Over to you, Sonal.
Thank you, Nirmala. Thank you everyone who's joining in, and thank you everybody who spoke before me, Dr. Shekhar, Tanishtha, Nirmala. We'll just basically go through बहुत सारे chat box में भी मैं देख रही हूँ लोग कह रहे हैं कि if possible अगर हम vernacular में बात कर सके. So I will try to keep my talk in English and Hindi क्योंकि बहुत सारे हमारे साथ grassroots workers भी जुड़े हुए हैं. सबसे पहले तो जब हम ये मैनुअल बना रहे थे 2-3-4 मेन पॉइंट्स जो हमें याद रखने हैं कि जब हम बच्चों के साथ काम कर रहे हैं एज फ्रंट लाइन वर्कर्स, एज पेरेंट्स, एज टीचर्स, it is not important for all of us to be clinical psychologists, and we are not, right? Let's also humbly accept that and yet understand कि हमारा जो रोल है ग्रासरूट पे वो कोई कम या ज़्यादा नहीं हो जाता है अगर हम प्रोफेशनली ट्रेंड नहीं हैं. अगर हम बच्चों के साथ कुछ सालों से या कुछ टाइम से काम कर रहे हैं तो कुछ बेसिक चीज़ें हैं जो हमें ऑलरेडी पता है या कुछ चीज़ें हैं जो हमें मालूम होनी चाहिए, जिसमें से सबसे पहले ये है कि जिन बच्चों को हमारा सबसे ज़्यादा प्यार चाहिए होगा ना, वो ऐसे तरीकों से पूछेंगे विच आर सम ऑफ द मोस्ट अनलविंग वेज. शायद वो इरिटेबल होंगे, शायद वो एक्स्ट्रा हाइपर होंगे, शायद वो जिद ज़्यादा करेंगे, शायद वो एंग्शियस होंगे, शायद वो उदास ज़्यादा होंगे. हर वो बच्चा जिसको हमारे प्यार की सबसे ज़्यादा ज़रूरत है वो अपने आप मांग लेगा, सिर्फ कह के या बोल के नहीं, बट शायद he or she or they will show it to us in ways which are very, very unloving at a lot of levels. So as caregivers, as parents, as teachers at the grassroots level, as NGO workers, हम कितना aware हैं, हम कितना उन signs and psychological stresses को पहचान सकते हैं, and only once we understand, how the child is behaving or asking for love in different ways, हम उसी तरीके से अपना response customize कर सकते हैं. दूसरी चीज़ ये जो डॉक्टर शेखर ने भी बहुत सुंदर से बोला कि मेंटल हेल्थ इज़ क्रिटिकली इम्पॉर्टेंट. हम ये नहीं समझें कि जब एक बच्चे को चोट लगती है या व्हेन अ चाइल्ड गेट्स हर्ट, जब हम देखते हैं कि खून आ रहा है, जख्म हुआ है, तो हम इमिडिएटली फर्स्ट एड के लिए दौड़ते हैं. पर एक बच्चा जब एंग्शियस होता है, उदास होता है, हीन भावना से ग्रस्त होता है, इंफीरियोरिटी कॉम्प्लेक्स होता है, हम क्यों कहते हैं कि दिस इज नॉट इम्पॉर्टेंट फॉर टुडे इन दिस मोमेंट, इट विल बी टेकन, ये बाद में हम डील कर सकते हैं. ऐसा हम ना करें. हम मेंटल हेल्थ और साइको सोशल कॉम्पोनेंट जिसको हम कहते हैं, जिसके मद्देनजर ये पूरा किट बनाया गया है, द रीजन व्हाई दिस एंटायर manual has been created for us is primarily that mental health is a critical component when we are working with children. Because of the very, very chaotic and strange times that we are in right now because of the pandemic, ये मेरे पहले भी स्पीकर्स ने इस बात पे छेड़ा और मैं दोहराना चाहती हूँ कि जब हम बच्चों के साथ काम करते हैं, जो बच्चा एक्स्ट्रा ट्रॉमा का शिकार होता है, या बच्चा जो एक चाइल्ड केयर इंस्टीट्यूशन में है, या स्पेशल चाइल्ड है, डिफरेंट एबिलिटी से जूझ रहा है, हम ये ज़रूर समझें कि हम उसको ये एहसास भी दिलाएं दैट एवरी स्कार दैट द चाइल्ड हैज़, दैट एवरी, चाहे फिर वो ट्रॉमा का स्कार हो, किसी भी तरीके की जिसकी चोट से वो गुजर रहा है मेंटली, वो बच्चा, वो स्कार सिर्फ वो रिमाइंडर, वो एक, इट्स नॉट अ रिमाइंडर ऑफ दैट दैट हर्ट दैट द चाइल्ड हैज गॉट, बट दैट let that scar also be a reminder of the fact that the child survived, is resilient, can do more, is more strong, right? As teachers, as caregivers, as parents, हम खुद भी बहुत सारी चीज़ों से जूझ रहे हैं, और चाहते ना चाहते हुए, knowingly unknowingly, we pass it on to the children who are in our care. Nirmala, if I can request you to keep moving the slides one by one, please. Yeah. A lot of times these little illustrations will show you, ये जब हम मैनुअल यूज़ करेंगे ग्रास रूट पे बच्चों के साथ या घर पे अपने बच्चों के साथ, तो हम कोशिश करें समझने की और उनसे पूछने की कि do they see these situations happening in front of their eyes, like around themselves all the time or sometimes? Do they feel जब वो ऑनलाइन होते हैं तो उनको कोई बार बार फेसबुक पे चैट करने के लिए कह रहा है? क्या वो घर में डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस होता देख रहे हैं? क्या जब वो ऑनलाइन है, ऑनलाइन की भी जो हम बात करेंगे अभी कुछ ही देर में, कि बच्चों को ऑनलाइन सेफ्टी हम एज पेरेंट्स और एज केयर गिवर्स और एज पीपल हु आर सर्विस प्रोवाइडर्स इन द एनजीओ सेक्टर, हम किस तरीके से बच्चों तक सेफ ऑनलाइन प्रैक्टिसेस जो हैं, कि जब वो, क्योंकि बहुत सारे सरकारी स्कूल्स, a lot of government schools are now reaching out to the children even at the bottom of the pyramid through the government school systems, through WhatsApps and through phone calls. पर हमारे बच्चे के पास अगर स्मार्टफोन और या फोन का एक्सेस बहुत ज़्यादा देर तक है, तो हम क्या क्या बातें उसको कह सकते हैं याद रखने के लिए, टू बी अवेयर ऑफ व्हाट ऑल थिंग्स. या सबसे इम्पॉर्टेंट हम समझें कि जब हम कह रहे हैं कि ये पैंडेमिक सिचुएशन है, दिस इज़ अ एक्सट्रीमली chaotic सिचुएशन. chaotic इसलिए भी है because the children are more vulnerable, and some of the children are more vulnerable, like Tanishta explained. Some of the children are, their vulnerability is increased because of the fact that they may be either at a childcare institution, etc. बहुत families में there's this massive stress which has come out, a lot of times. आज सुबह, for example, I will give you this example. आज सुबह we were talking to a child who's about 18 and a half years old, and she's already had 3 abortions. And this child was completely feeling lost, didn't have access to the counselors at Protsahan, didn't have access to the teachers that she normally, would reach out to in the last 6 months, 1 year, jab se humne usko jana hai. She was, the immediate access to my a known face is now lost, right? And when you are talking about, talking to the child, counseling the child on the phone, she was feeling that उसने एग्जैक्टली ये चीज़ कही कि मैम मुझे लगता है कि अब मेरे शरीर में कुछ बचा नहीं है. after 3 abortions, I feel that there's nothing left in my body anymore. And somehow we had to explain it to her that it's not the end of the world. We had to explain it. हमने एक छोटा सा पेड़ का example लिया. Again, when you're talking to a child, हम उसको उसकी भाषा में समझाएं. As caregivers, as parents, it's very important for us to understand that when we are working with a child or when we are with a child, उसका जो anxiety है, stress है, we are trying to deal with it or trying to address it in a way in which the child understands, not in a way in which I think it's perfect, right? And then we gave her an example of a tree. कि जब एक पेड़ अपने पतझड़ में during the autumn, when the tree loses all its leaves, it's not that the leaves don't come back again. It's not that, how do you explain a child who feels that, उसका self-esteem and self-respect and self-love बिल्कुल खत्म हो गया है, right? And how do you, so you give examples. So ये जब आप manual भी देखोगे जो आप लोगों के पास पहुंची है, बहुत सारे exactly इसी example के basis पे बहुत सारे worksheets, counseling sheets बनाए गए हैं, जिसमें हमने we've tried to keep mandalas. We'll talk about it in the last 5 minutes also, how you can use those worksheets. But the entire principle of all of those counseling activities and worksheets is just the same: positive reinforcement to the child and a solution focused thinking approach. आप उस बच्चे को, अगर वो already anxiety से गुजर रहा है, उसका स्कूल बंद हो गया है, उसको mandatory quarantine में रख दिया गया है, हो सकता है the building in which they are living has been sealed, we don't know what situation the child is in. How do you keep the child safe, right? So often, of course, how we speak, how calmly we speak, the child will kind of notice that subconsciously at every level. We have to try and understand the situation and the reason. ये Dr. Shekhar ने भी बहुत सुंदर से कहा कि unless we understand the situation and the context in which the child is, we will never be able to address the situation or the negative behavior that the child is dealing with. We have to maintain a regular routine and give children specific responsibilities. इसके साथ साथ मैं ये भी ऐड करूँ कि जब से ये पैंडेमिक और लॉकडाउन हुआ है, बहुत सारे लोग कॉन्वर्सेशन कर रहे हैं, how are we most productive, हम कितने वेबिनार्स देखते हैं, हम कितनी मास्टर क्लासेस अटेंड कर रहे हैं, हम कितने नए लेसन्स सीख रहे हैं. But I think much more than being productive, it's important to be calm. It's important to be self-aware. It's okay to rest. And we have to let the child know these pointers as well. We have to... एक बार पीछे जाना प्लीज निर्मला. ये पहले भी बोला गया है कि चाइल्ड लाइन 1098 का जो नंबर है हम बिल्कुल याद रखें, और कोई भी ऐसी सिचुएशन जो एज ग्रास रूट केयर गिवर्स वी फील दैट वी आर नॉट एबल टू हैंडल डायरेक्टली, we definitely have to reach out to support or to a help center like a child line, like a child helpline rather, या पुलिस स्टेशन, या अगर हम घर में डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस, ये जो नंबर्स हैं 1091 for women's helpline, 1098 for child helpline, let's make sure that our children know numbers. For people like us who are working in the sector, we might feel that, hey, we know what 1098 is. But for a child in distress, these numbers have to be constantly hammered onto their brains and to their subconscious. कि जब वो दिक्कत में हो, this is the number that they can always constantly reach out to. Yes, Nirmala, please. These are again some very very critical points. बच्चों का जो online access है to चाहे फिर वो smartphone हो या ना हो, उनका जो एक phone या एक tablet या computer, depending on the privilege the child enjoys, उसका access to these technology or gadgets has increased. We have to make sure that all these little 2, 3, 4 points which are mentioned here on your slide, which will also be there in the manual that you each of you receive, is the most critical point here to remember is that, which is also based in the basic mental health or psychosocial aspect, that the capacity to say a no. And if a child learns to say a no, या हम अगर किसी चीज के लिए कि कुछ मना करते हैं या we stand up to take a stand against it, it does not make us unpopular. It is very important for a child to know कि अगर आपका peer भी, if your peers, if your classmates, आपके सहपाठी आपको कोई ऐसी चीज करने के लिए ऑनलाइन बोल रहे हैं जो आप नहीं करना चाहते हो या आप uncomfortable हो, it's okay to say a no. It is also okay to block पीपल, चाहे फिर वो स्ट्रेंजर्स हों, चाहे आपके जानने वाले हों, जो आपको ज़रूरत से ज़्यादा तंग कर रहे हैं, in these times or any which way later, it's okay to say a no, it's okay to block, it's okay to not accept friend requests. It's definitely, you don't have to accept friend requests from strangers. बहुत सारे लिंक्स हैं, आज सुबह भी हमारे जिन बच्चों के साथ हम डायरेक्टली काम करते हैं, बहुत सारे लिंक्स अब सर्कुलेट होने लग गए हैं व्हाट्सएप पे, जिसमें कह रहे हैं कि आप इस लिंक पे क्लिक करोगे तो आपको 10,000 रुपए, 15,000 रुपए मिल जाएंगे जो पेंडिंग थे, एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा. लॉट ऑफ फेक न्यूज आर ऑल्सो बीइंग सर्कुलेटेड. हम अपने बच्चों को ये बहुत मैंडेटोरिली इंफॉर्मेशन दे पाएं या दें कि हाउ टू बी सेफ, हाउ टू बी फेक न्यूज और रियल न्यूज में डिफरेंस कैसे करना है. बेशक हम 6 साल के बच्चे को ये ना समझा पाए, पर 17, 16, 18 साल के बच्चे के साथ हम ये कॉन्वर्सेशंस शुरुआत कर दें. Next, please.
Sonal, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to give you a reminder that we have maybe 5 more minutes before we should move on to the Q&A session.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, Nirmala? Yeah, so this is the last slide. The whole point is जो आपके पास caregiving psychosocial manual है, this has all the details of all the activities. उसमें से कुछ snapshots हमने we have put it on this slide to basically talk about when you are talking to a child, it's okay if a child is over communicating, right? When a child is over communicating, it clearly means that a child has things that they want to share with you. So using these different worksheets, counseling activities that we have provided, a caregiver or a parent can talk to the child, or even if you can engage the child in all of these activities, in sabka explanation, they're very, very self-explanatory activities. They basically will help the parent or the caregiver have conversations with children which are dealing with emotions or feelings like fear, emotions or feelings like courage, or emotions or feelings like anxiety. How do we deal with all of these emotions using these worksheets? So for example, when you're talking to children, while you're doing these worksheets, it's important to talk to them. It's always important to talk to children like they're the most kindest, wisest, most beautiful, magical human beings, because what they believe while you are with them, or while you're teaching or explaining them things, what they believe is what they will become later in life. This pandemic situation, Dr. Shekhar also explained that can we create beautiful memories? Of course, this is a very, very difficult time for all of us, and for some so much more than the others. But how do we make these moments, how do we make the fact that parents have more time with children now at home, teachers have access to children now through phone calls more, how do we make sure that those memories can be created? कुछ मंडाला शीट्स यहाँ पे मेंशन्ड हैं, कुछ कलरिंग शीट्स मेंशन्ड हैं इन दी मैनुअल. ज़रूरी नहीं है कि वो सारी कलरिंग शीट्स आप प्रिंट आउट लेके ही करो, because at not all locations will a printing out facility be possible or available. It's okay if you use these counseling sheets or these activities as just simple cues. अगर आपको लगता है कि this is how बेसिक एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग लेकर आप बच्चे को ये ड्राइंग प्रॉम्प्ट्स की तरह भी यूज करा सकते हो. मैनुअल में एक बहुत क्रिटिकल एस्पेक्ट है जो ओल्डर किड्स के साथ किया जा सकता है, 15 से 18 साल या 12 से 18 साल के बच्चों के साथ किया जा सकता है. दैट इज वेरी स्पेसिफिकली माय वेल बीइंग प्लान का टेम्पलेट दिया गया है कि हाउ डू यू मेक श्योर, बेसिकली इंकरेजिंग देम टू डू एक्टिविटीज दैट पुश देम लिटिल बाय लिटिल, so that their physical, emotional self, their courage, they understand who I am, right? And if you have any more questions, all of us will be very happy to address it in the next section. Over to you, Astha.
Thanks so much, Sonal. Thanks so much, all of the panelists, all of the speakers, for these incredible presentations. We've received so much amazing information today. Well, now moving on to the Q&A session, we have about 12 minutes to go before the session is scheduled to end. And we have so many people who have raised their hands, I'm seeing in the participant list. And we've also received questions privately through the chat box. We'll just try to handle as many questions as we can. I apologize in advance to people whose questions are not able to be answered today. We'll first move to the people who have raised their hands. I will unmute you, James Elias. And once I've unmuted you, you can please ask your question to the speakers. James Elias.
But we can't hear you. Yeah.
James, your voice is breaking a little bit.
Maybe you can go on to some other person because his audio is not clear.
No one can hear James, right?
No.
No, we can't. No, we can't.
You can mute him.
I just didn't know if it was my internet. Okay, we'll move on. Sorry, James, we'll have to move on. We can't hear you. Moving on to Baljeet Kaur. Baljeet Kaur, I'm going to unmute you now.
Hello.
Baljeet, can you hear us?
Hello.
Can you also mute James Elias so that we don't keep getting his?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Hi, this is Valerie. I've been trying to put James in the waiting room or mute him, and I'm not able to do that. I think it's a Zoom error. I'm still going to keep trying to do that. Sorry for the
Hello.
Thanks, Valerie. No worries. Appreciate your help. Baljeet, can you hear us? I think maybe the volume of participants is so high that Zoom's having some issues. How about I just read some questions from the chat box while Valerie can help us troubleshoot the issue that's cropping up right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just open the book. Awesome. So we have about 7 or 8 questions in the chat box. Let's go through them. Okay, so there is one question which is asking about digital addiction, basically. So one of our participants says that some of our children are addicted to games, say between 11 to 19 years of age, and it's even increasing due to the lockdown. What can we do and how do we reduce that behavior?
I'll take that. I also saw a couple of questions on education. And by the way, someone asked, what is NIMHANS? NIMHANS is the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, a postgraduate teaching hospital on mental health and sciences in Bangalore under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Thank you very much. Now, this is a very interesting question because on the one hand, we are talking about these are called behavioral addictions. Texting, social media, gaming. These are called behavioral addictions. And now there's the lockdown, and then you're saying do online learning. So how do you reconcile these two? And the parameters are the same, which is that any rational discussion of parents with children, जितना समय ऑनलाइन पढ़ाई पे या मोबाइल फोन वगैरह का उपयोग जो है एंटरटेनमेंट और मनोरंजन के लिए एक तरह से रूटीन अगर बन जाए, if you have a routine and which is agreed upon, it's not a routine that is thrust on children, but a routine that is agreed upon, which means it's democratically agreed upon. तो थोपा नहीं जा रहा बच्चों के ऊपर, बच्चों के साथ वार्तालाप और चर्चा के द्वारा through discussion you reach an agreement, and so you create an equitable amount of time, so children are not spending like 6-8 hours on the social media or on mobile phones and so on. There is family time, there is entertainment, there is online learning, and there is whatever you can do for. So it's a question of this kind of discussion. I saw another question on the chat which was about the impact on education during the lockdown, particularly in sensitive areas of the country and so on. Now, this is something that the education department is also seriously looking into. And there are a lot of online resources to maintain continuity of education. And if some kind of an arrangement is made so that they stay in touch with reading and writing. But I think we must understand all this in the framework of what is the purpose of education. शिक्षा का उद्देश्य क्या है और ये कहना कि केवल साक्षरता, that numeracy and literacy is the purpose of education, या अच्छे अंक लाना, इंजीनियरिंग वगैरह में दाखिल होना, ये एक सीमित दृष्टिकोण है. You know, this is a limited vision of, and ultimately I think if we all agree that the purpose of education is the development of an egalitarian personhood, एक समान अधिकारी व्यक्तित्व का उत्पन्न होना. Second, the purpose of education is an identity that is imbued with aesthetic sensibility. एक ऐसा व्यक्तित्व, एक ऐसी शख्सियत जिसमें कला और रचनात्मक तत्व हो. And finally, a citizenry which is socially responsive and responsible. तो बच्चों में नागरिकता की धारणा और नागरिकता का अनुभव जो है वो हम जागृत करें, ये शिक्षा है. बाकी सब तो numeracy and literacy and language is ingrained. Children will learn it, especially bright children will learn it. जिनमें कुछ learning problems है, उनमें थोड़ा ज्यादा ध्यान देना आवश्यक है. शुक्रिया. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shekhar. Thanks for taking a question, so Motu. Very helpful for me. Any of our other resource persons want to add to what Dr. Shekhar just said about continuing education at home?
Hi, and this is Nirmala. Can I come in?
Yes, please, Nirmala.
You know, that's right what Dr. Shekhar said, that we need to have a larger understanding of what we are teaching, because even if the children are at home and they are maybe not doing the regular courses, but if they are learning to be with each other, or maybe support somebody at the community level by making a mask and giving to them, if they are learning empathy, that's also learning, right? And that's something not for the children, but as an adult for us to understand and comprehend. But of course, there are online courses, as he said. No, I would like to address one question, and I want Sonal to come over here as well. Somebody has asked about how we can explain the meaning of mandala to children in the age group of 13 to 18. Sonal, would you like to respond?
Yes. Should I just take it over?
Yeah, please.
Okay, I'll just take out that bit as well. Okay, see, the basic significance of using, और हमने ये जो mandalas worksheet में डाले हैं, counseling activities में, manual में डाले हैं, they're very specifically animal-powered healing mandalas, right? We don't want to make it very spiritual or corny and things like that. We want to keep it very education-focused, yet we want to bring in the best principles of easy, like empathy and the most simplest principles of just being human, right? और वो हम जानवरों से कैसे सीख सकते हैं is the idea behind the mandalas, which have been very, very specifically created by Elena from Germany. These the 3 mandalas that you will see in the worksheets. The animals that we've chosen to power the mandalas for the purpose of this gift specifically have been chosen with a certain symbolism that they carry. For example, if we have used one mandala has a dolphin, right? The idea is so that the caregiver can, or the parent can talk to the child about also the power of kindness, the power of intelligence with empathy. In one of the mandalas, we have chosen a bear. एक भालू को चुना है मंडाला को रिप्रेजेंट करने के लिए. तो पीछे उसके बैकग्राउंड में एक सुंदर सा मंडाला है जो बच्चा उसमें रंग भरेगा, और वो the way the mandala is created or designed is so that the concentrative the concentration powers of the child enhance. And the reason we have teamed it up with a certain animal that represents certain symbolic features, like for example जो भालू एक मंडाला में मैं बात कर रही हूँ, उसमें हम physical power, adaptability, strength, mobility, different ये symbols हैं जो parents या caregivers बात कर सकते हैं while using these worksheets. So empathy building is not something जो कि ज्ञान session में आता है. Empathy building is something while doing a certain sort of a counseling activity. You can also use stories. You know, आप भालू की कोई story शुरू, ऐसा नहीं है कि आपको specifically word by word verbatim आपको ये sheet या counseling activity follow करनी है. These are cues. You want, you can use them as it is, but the idea is to have the parents also grow and evolve using this counseling kit. So you can use stories that are specific to the cultural context of the children you're working with. And after the coloring activity, the facilitator or the parent or the caregiver can talk about these specific values that that specific animal in that mandala is showing. So the entire idea is to build empathy, to build concentration, all by using simple power of art and play. Hope that answers.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Sonal, and Nirmala for picking up on that question. We're nearing the end of our time, so let's just take a couple more questions. But before that, I just wanted to remind all the participants that next week, we will have a session on education during this time. So stay tuned for that and having more conversations on the topic that we were earlier talking about. Okay, now back to questions. And since I'm feeling very adventurous, I am going to go back to the participant list, and let's try to hear from Satyanarayan Patnaik. Satyanarayan Patnaik, my colleague Valerie has unmuted you. Please
Yeah,
ask your question.
Namaskar, and thanks for the nice presentations. It was a good learning for us. I think you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
we can.
Yeah, so my point was that actually because now the migrant people are coming to the villages, a huge migration, migrant already, they have reached in western part of the Orissa. But we are looking actually a lot of the children are in the fear because their parents, even the father are staying in isolation and also in quarantine home and all things. Because the children are not feeling that whether they are not feeling comfort. Because why not the parents are not mixing with them and like this. So in that situation actually, because high level counseling is highly essential for the both the parents and also the children. So I think what is your view on this actually? Because this is a very serious concern also.
Yeah, I'll take that. You see, for any conflict, depending on the age of the child, the explanation that is required is tailored to the age of the child. I'm presuming this is a situation where the family and the child can be together, but because of quarantine reasons, they are separate. Now, just take hand washing, for example, and in the pandemic. How do you explain to a child that, you know, आम तौर पे जैसे खाना खाने से पहले हम लोग हाथ धोते हैं या दूषित वस्तु को छुए तो हाथ धोते हैं और दूषण ज्यादा हो तो ज्यादा धोते हैं. You know, we wash our hands before eating. If we touch something that is dusty or dirty, we wash our hands. And if it is very dusty, we wash it a little better. So this is called as the simple use of germ theory. And even a young child as young as 5 or 6 or even younger will understand this notion. So why is there, for example, a lockdown? You know, if there's a heat wave, everybody stays indoors, you know, because you don't want to expose yourself to. So it's the use of simple explanations which are based on understandable health options that we explain to the child there. I also, related to this question, Mr. Patnaik, I also saw a question on the chat that someone says, how do we deal with these migrant population who are really vulnerable in terms of the reach of these kind of services and so on? So depending on, you know, a quarantine within the context of migration and migrant workers, both from the Women and Child Department and the Health Department, Mahila Bal Kalyan Vibhag, Kendriya Sarkar और स्वास्थ्य और परिवार कल्याण विभाग से भी the instructions are very clear. Please work with the district administration. जिला के कर्मचारी और कार्यकर्ता जो हैं, they have been empowered. The district admin, the district police have been empowered to assist them. And they have all the stuff with them. They have walkie-talkies, They have mobile phones, they have access to these kind of networks and so on. And one can certainly use the district administration to assist you in reaching these really vulnerable populations. Thank you for raising the issue, Mr. Patnaik. Very useful.
Thank you, Dr. Shekhar. We are a little over time. So can we do another question? Would that be okay? Resource person?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's do one last question and then we will end it for today. I am going to go ahead and ask Ritika Kohli to ask her question. Ritika.
Hello.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah,
Hi.
hi. So my question is like, I work in an NGO which has children with special need, and especially the children who are visually, they have low vision and they have low IQ. They are facing struggle when it comes to studying online. So when I was talking to them over a video call, so they were not even comfortable talking on the video call as they are comfortable face to face. So I had a word with the counselor. So the counselor also said the same thing. She said that the children there, it is very difficult to take the sessions with them online because they are not opening up. So how to deal with such situation? That's my question.
Well, I'm sure Sonal will have something to say to this, but so I'll be very brief and I'll let Sonal come in also. Special situations call for creative solutions. सृजनशीलता और रचनात्मक अगर हम solutions ढूंढने तो अवश्य मिलेगा. It's very similar to a question that had been asked to me that ये mask पहनना जो है in institutions which have children who have intellectual disability and who have challenging behaviors, वो mask रखते नहीं है, उतार देते हैं, क्या करें that? See, the thing is, don't struggle with किसी के पास infection नहीं है, बाहर के देश से नहीं आए हैं, they don't have a travel history, there are no symptoms, you don't have to struggle to put the mask on. Secondly, convert these things into playful uses of, rather than forcing or compelling someone to use it, if you convert it into playfulness, तो ये लीला शब्द जो है, अक्सर कहा जाता था ना, कुछ जब बुरा होता हम ये नहीं कहते कि ये ईश्वर की लीला थी, भगवान की लीला. लीला का मतलब क्या है? The word Leela literally means playfulness, and the use of playfulness, therefore, to deal creatively with challenging situations. Similarly, with children who have a combination of disabilities, visual and intellectual disability, I would say use creative solutions rather than relying on those parameters which they're in any case compromised with. So I would probably use more auditory modality or more tactile modalities, given, of course, the fact that you need to maintain physical distance at this point of time. But the idea is to provide stimulation in other domains that are intact. Sonal, anything from you?
I'll just actually add on to what Shekharji said. The fact that auditory and tactile, I'll just kind of leave it with an example. Is for example, there are two specific children that we are working with जो बोल सुन नहीं सकते हैं. And sometimes there is also like a couple of children, like you said, जो देख नहीं सकते. And sometimes you have to be creative with what you have at hand. Innovation does not always mean that you're going to create a software product. Innovation sometimes also means that you are most simplistically making solutions go to the last mile, right? And the fact specifically for your for the purview in the context of the question that you asked, dear, it was how about using some WhatsApp stories, राइट. सो व्हाट्सएप में वॉइस टेक्स्ट का फीचर होता है, आप वॉइस मैसेज भेज सकते हैं, राइट. यूट्यूब से कोई भी बहुत क्रिएटिव स्टोरी, जो कार्टून हो, एनिमेशन हो, एनीथिंग दैट यू कैन डाउनलोड. सो व्हेन यू डाउनलोडिंग, सो यूट्यूब हैज टू ऑप्शंस, राइट. यू कैन डाउनलोड द एंटायर यूट्यूब वीडियो एज अ वीडियो, एंड यू कैन डाउनलोड द एंटायर यूट्यूब वीडियो का सिर्फ ऑडियो, right? If you just Google it up, you will find the YouTube audio downloader. So there is this, all of that is available right there. So any creative stories which are already there on YouTube, you don't have to create anything from scratch. You can just download their audio, right? And you can look at stories that are very specific to empathy building, stories that are very specific to COVID response mechanisms, COVID stories that are very, very specific to how to deal with children or how to talk to children directly. So they're very animated voices. All of that is all there on internet. Like internet pe dhoondne se bhagwan bhi milega aapko. Like it's true, right? So you will find all of that there. You just have to download that and make sure that you send it to your child on WhatsApp as a voice text message. Maybe that could be the beginning of the creativity.
Ma'am, can I just complete my question? Like, what happens is, because our formal education system is such that students have to score also alongside. So two of the children at our home, they are failing continuously in their exams because of this low vision problem, although they are fine, like their motor skills and everything is fine. So this system again, like this is again very new to them, this whole video calling and everything. So our formal system is not equipped enough.
No. See, this is not an issue which is very COVID specific. It's an issue in education. You have to advocate for the child, and sometimes one has to fight with the systems. And this is the reason why we have alternatives, like the open school or special benefits and resources that children with any kind of disability are given to navigate the education system. So one has to be a very strong advocate if a system places limitations on the way that the child is able to process that. It's like this kid who told his teacher, if I cannot learn the way you teach me, why don't you try and teach me the way that I can learn? It is also related to assumptions that we make about the modality of how people respond to. I'm reminded of the story. There's a guy who went to a person and said, "Bhai sahab, ye address kahan hai?" And he said, so he goes to his ear and says, "Bhai sahab, ye address kahan hai?" So that guy takes the paper and write, "Abhe gadhe mein sun sakta hu. मैं बोल नहीं सकता. Why are you shouting?" So we make assumptions about people's capacities to kind of learn on the one hand, and on the other hand. So it's a very important point that you're raising, ma'am. And I think what is required here is really to advocate for children within systems, to say this, to ensure that they stay not just stay floating, but they're able to progress as far as their educational and other developmental trajectories are concerned.
And you can very
Thank you, sir.
Look at Khan Academy has an audio, for every class, like 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 12th standards, they have audio versions of their chapters being explained as well. So you could probably look at the Khan Academy thing. You could also look at the BOLO app, BOLO app. That's again specific to the CBSE, ICSE chapters, if you're looking at the educational school material, if that helps.
Asta and Valerie, can I just take half a minute?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so just because there were a lot of questions in the comments on the chat box, and I know that from those who are watching on YouTube also, they are asking. So the presentations will be available on the Sphere India site, right? Just wanted to make sure everybody, including those who are seeing the YouTube live stream, are aware that they will be available there, as well as the manual that was presented here will be available on the Sphere India site for downloading. So just wanted to leave it out there.
It's not the Sphere India website. It will be the COVID-19 Academy website. So that's the Sphere India COVID-19 Academy.org.in. Astha will give that information also at the end of the session.
Okay, great.
Hanji. Thanks so much for that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you to all of our resource persons for coming out today. Dr. Shekhar, Sonal, Nirmala, Tanishtha, amazing presentations. We all learned a lot. So many questions have been raised, and we're now going to search for the answers. So just in closing, let me quickly share my screen so I can deal with some administrative things. Continue. Yes, can everybody see my screen now?
Yes.
We can.
Yes.
Perfect. So just the last few things, everyone asks us about the course evaluation and the certificate of participation. So you can see on the screen, this is the COVID-19 Academy website that Valerie also just mentioned. So please go to this website, www.sphereindiacovid19academy.org. After 24 hours would be best because it takes us some time to upload all the relevant details to the website. You will be able to see the quiz, which if you do, you will get your certificate of participation. You will be able to see the presentations of the resource persons today, and you will also be able to see the manual that we just talked about. So this is the website. Second announcement is that tomorrow we have a very interesting session planned as well. It's on food security and nutrition during this time. So it's tomorrow at 4 p.m. We have the YouTube link on the screen right now, but shortly after this session, we will email you all the registration link for tomorrow's session as well. So please join us again. And lastly, if you have any other questions, any suggestions, any feedback for us, please write to us at covid19academy@sphereindia.org.in. covid19academy@sphereindia.org.in, and we will try to get back to you as soon as possible. Valerie, is there anything else that I have missed out on?
No, that will be it, Asta. Thank you, Asta. Thank you, all of the resource persons. Thank you, Nirmala, Tanishta, Dr. Shekhar, and Sonal once again for being here. And thank you to all our participants for taking the time out and attending this session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.